in the long-running, ongoing, wide-ranging RPG conversation I'm having with Ivan from the Ivan Mike 1968 channel about all things gaming. One topic that just really didn't fit into the text box nature of Facebook Messenger was one on multiple GMs. Now, this is something that I've got a lot of experience with, although not so much recently. But it seems like the Game Master curse is a curse that a lot of Game Masters just accept. Once they become the sort of de facto Game Master in their group, they think, well, I guess I'll always be the Game Master, or no one in my group is going to run it unless I do it, or something like that. And sure, that happens. It's true. That's why people talk about it. It's out there. Now, my boy Vito here, he would love to run something for me, if he could. But lacking thumbs, it's really difficult for him to turn the pages and take notes. And he's hesitant to try running something without, detailed notes about how it all goes. And this is kind of like the less experienced game master in your group who would love to run a game but thinks that you do it better. Or there's something that's just more fun about how you're going to approach the game than how they could approach a game. They haven't built up the confidence yet. Or maybe there's someone in your group who has never run a game and never thought about it. That's something that you do, not them. So these perceptual barriers to becoming a game master are often just never considered. Right? You are the game master and they are the players, and that's how it'll be. Now, some groups, of course, talk about it. Hey, why don't you run that? Or someone finds a great game in a game store and says, hey, I found this great game in a game store. How about we play that? And they hand it to, the de facto GM, who really ought to just hand it right back and say, yeah, I can't wait until you run it. But, that's a social dynamic that, groups are responsible for themselves. But it is possible to run a game and run it successfully with multiple GMs. And there's a couple of different ways to approach it, of course. You could simply rotate. Right? This week, my campaign. Next week, your campaign. Next week, your campaign. The week after that, her campaign. Week after that, their shared campaign or whatever. Now, the shared campaign is the other way to do it, and that's with one campaign setting with multiple GMs. If you have multiple campaigns, this is easy. It's just being a game master. But if you have a shared campaign, there are a couple of things that you need to be aware of. I'll put a link below in the description box to a blog post which details this all out in text, but here we go. One of the most important things is motivation. If you're going to have a group of GMs running something, have the GMs who are participating be ones who want to run the game. Not being pressured into it or guilted into it. They have enjoyed being a player in the game, or they're interested in seeing what it's like to run the game, and there's no time. Right? We only have time to play one or two campaigns. Right? We only have time to play every other week or whatever it is. When there's time pressure in your group and people really like a particular game, that is ripe territory for suggesting that we switch up who's playing and who's running the game from week to week. The next one is quite important if this idea is ever going to be something more than just a thought experiment in your group. If you really intend to do it, then the next step, once everybody who's going to be a game master has agreed to all work together to do that, is to achieve some consensus. Right? Those people build the campaign together, and this includes how the system will be interpreted. Right? So as you move from game master to game master, the implementation of the system and the interpretation of the setting remains the same. Now, you'll still have the different feel of how the game master makes their rulings, but you as a player and you as a game master won't run into the friction that is caused when your expectations are somehow twisted or violated by how someone else is running the game. That's important. We don't want this coalition of the willing to fragment because the way this person is running the game is significantly different in terms of mechanics and in terms of the knowledge and understanding of the world from these other people. We don't want that split. So everybody needs to agree. Now, the last time I did a major campaign along these lines, it was easier to make notes. We had a giant binder. I would use something like OneNote now, but in those days we had this very, very large binder, which had all the setting information indexed for everybody. It had separate sections for common non-player characters. It had another section for, let's say, reserved non-player characters. It had the list of all of the agendas which were going and which were open. And everything was laid out in terms of the order in which things would be happening. So when I was running it, I have the binder, and then I pass it off to the next game master in the planned sequence. And originally we set it up so that the schedule was obvious. You had 2 weeks. You'd run 2 back-to-back sessions, and we played every week. So I would have it for this Saturday and next Saturday, and at the end of that session pass it off to the next guy who'd have a week to refamiliarize himself with everything, and then he'd run it for 2 weeks. Now, some of us were more prolific than others, and this is the next point, the handling the schedule. Some people have an easier time preparing for sessions. Some people are more comfortable improvising. Some people enjoy the game master's chair more than others. So sticking to a schedule is important if you really want to have that feel of the rotating GMs, if you really want to have the opportunity to play in your own setting, if you really want to have the opportunity to play much more regularly than you have been. Surrendering to the schedule is important. But at the same time, there are going to be life events which interfere with people getting ready. There's going to be lacks of creativity from time to time, or a fantastic idea that needs more time to mature. This sort of stuff happens, and so an ability to talk to the other game masters and say, do you mind if I go for 3 weeks instead of 2? Do you mind if I, jump ahead in the order, and so on. All of these things should be possible to negotiate without it feeling like someone's trying to hog the spotlight. There should be a reason why you want to do it. So let's recap where we are so far. We have a game that multiple people in the group want to run. We have established a consensus so that we will run the game according to the same understanding. We won't have one game master dropping a whole section of rules, or refusing to allow a particular element of the rules, or deciding to use completely different mechanics for something than everybody else. Right? Everyone's going to run the game the same way. We have a clear schedule of when this rotation is going to happen. People will be running their sessions with that schedule in mind. But it will be possible to negotiate changes in that schedule for whatever reason. And we have a device, whatever it is, that helps everybody stay organized. It is a device that grows over time as new details are added from play, as new agendas are developed between characters in play, as cooperation between game masters expands. All of these notes are put in the binder so these details do not get lost, and so that new ideas for sessions can be generated simply by flipping through the pages of what has happened, what was expected to happen, who's in the area, and that sort of thing. So that's where we are so far. Once you've laid this foundation, there are a lot of things that you can now do, and there are a lot of spin-off benefits that happen. So I mentioned earlier a major campaign. This was a Vampire the Dark Ages chronicle that our group ran. It had a regular cast of 9 characters. There were times when this expanded to 13. And I'm talking about 13 players in the room. Okay. There were 4 game masters, so 1 game master, 13 players. 3 of those 13 players were also game masters. So what this enabled us to do was have a recurring cast of NPCs that the active game master, or storyteller in this case, did not need to run. Right. Our group wasn't the biggest fan of troop style play, but it wasn't something we shied away from either. So each of the other 3 game masters, whoever was running the game, had a certain number of the NPC cast that they would always portray. Right? And there were, like, my player character, when I was a game master, was usually absent from the types of stories that I was running. But from time to time, the other characters would want to interact with my player character. And there was one of the 3 GMs who was tasked with the role of representing my character the way I would. That was always fun to see how they would try and get inside my head that way. So from the only player point of view, we have a very rich cast of non-player characters who have distinct personalities and voices. It's not that one game master attempting to show all of these characters. Plus, it also lets you start having crowd scenes, larger scenes with interaction, where you don't have the dreaded conversation with yourself, which is one of my least favorite tasks as a game master. In fact, it's so low on my list of enjoyments that I find it kind of funny. And now, of course, I would like to develop more comfort with the tools I've developed to handle that. And so I put myself in that situation a lot, and I find my struggles humorous. But you can just obviate all of that and have, you know, the king or the prince of the city in this particular example communicating with, you know, other important people in the scene and communicating with the player characters. And it's not, you know, this juggling thing for the GM. That's pretty cool. And because you're all working together, establishing the foundation of the game world, this is something that doesn't need a lot of discussion. This is what I want you to say in this scene, right? They have a good sense of what should be said in that scene, and it keeps everybody honest. So I like that too. So these are just some of the benefits. Of course, direct collaboration. You know, you run 2 sessions, and the players have all these ideas about, you know, what they should do and what other characters in the situation are doing and what might happen next. And you sit down with the other game masters and you start talking about, you know, what all of the NPCs should be doing and what all the spin-off effects are. And there's just a lot more creativity. And you don't have to keep so much secret. You get to share things as they develop, and people can watch how what you're running unfolds. It's really interesting. Now, another variation on this is to follow all of these pre-existing conditions, right? To agree on the game, to agree how to run it, to set up a resource so that you can not step on each other's toes creatively and avoid errors of memory and that sort of thing. But it's not to stay in the same time period. So we were running the White Wolf Trinity universe at the time. So this game master and I divided up time. So he ran Adventure and into the early days of Aberrant, and I ran the later days of Aberrant, and I ran Trinity. Now the players had no idea that we were collaborating, which was part of what we were going for. We wanted the 3 game lines to be distinct We wanted Adventure to feel different in play than Aberrant and Trinity. We wanted these three things to feel like different games. But we also wanted that coherence of, this is a shared universe. The events of Adventure, as different and unusual as they might seem in compared to how Aberrant was put together and the far-flung future of Trinity. But at the same time, these things are connected. Now, the characters in play have no idea that any of this is going to be connected. The Adventure characters are living, in their period, and they don't survive to Aberrant. They die before that happens, and of natural causes or whatever, or torn apart by strange creatures from the Black Lagoon. But that's neither here nor there. And the Trinity characters are born long, long after the events of Aberrant. So there was a need for a disconnect, and there was a need for continuity. And that could be neatly handled by having different game masters running different time periods. But we had one long-running plot that went through the whole thing. There was a group that could operate over that vast stretch of time, and they had certain things that they needed to do. Then once we put that in motion, once we put that idea in motion, then we could operate independently. So we didn't have to share secrets with each other. We had to explain what the through line was of what this group in the background was doing, and what tenuous connections there might be between the characters of this era, that era, and this future era. But that was it. We were independent game masters running independent games, and yet the situations that the characters might uncover were definitely related. And when that revelation was finally made, and you saw the light bulbs going off in the players of, hey, wait, that's and he's related to, and it was extremely rewarding and really a more profound effect, in my opinion at least, than when you do this sort of thing as a solo game master. People expect maybe there to be callbacks or references or some kind of homage to other characters or earlier parts of a campaign or past campaigns or whatnot when it's you running your regular game. But when there's been no discussion of it happening, and there are multiple game masters and these different games are linked, there seems to be a bigger payoff. So that's yet another reason why taking these extra steps, this little bit of extra effort, might be worthwhile. One more thing to consider is secrets. And I don't just mean secrets that the GM or the collection of GMs keep from the players so they can discover them as maybe the point of play. I mean secrets like plots that only one game master knows. Now, this isn't relevant to all games. There are certain games where this just never comes up. But some games, by their nature, have a lot of political maneuvering in the background, such as a vampire game, or secrets mankind was not meant to know, such as Call of Cthulhu. And you hope that when the other game masters are in their role as player, they get the thrill of discovering these things like they would naturally. So how can you also have this and all the benefits of collaboration? Well, that's part of what the binder does, and it's also part of what the schedule does. Along with scheduling out the time of when who is going to be running particular sessions, you can also assign types of information handling or types of story. You can break it down in any way to help compartmentalize the information. And while this can lead to some of the players in your group employing what I call meta deduction to say, so-and-so is running the game this week, so it's probably about this type of story. But if you're clever, if you parcel out different types of stories so that it's much harder to see any kind of pattern, and if you allow for collaboration for overlap of story type, then you can reintroduce this kind of opaque barrier that protects the secret of what today's session might be about or might involve. Now, as an example, in the case of something like secret documents, right? So there might be a MacGuffin that the characters have to chase down. They have to recover this secret document, and its contents are not revealed by the end of the sessions where the introducing game master is in charge. So, the rotation happens. Those secret documents are still in play, but they were never revealed during the course of the adventure concerning the secret documents. So one or more of the players might be really curious about those secret documents. As their characters, they weren't supposed to open them, right? So they deliver them to Mr. Johnson, or they deliver them to the king, or whoever it is, right? But they still want to know, and they keep manipulating situations so that they can find out what's in the secret documents. But who can reveal that? Now, in one way of running things, only that introductory GM, the guy who put the secret documents in play, only he can reveal what they are. Or you could have open collaboration, so that maybe the guy who introduced the secret documents in play has no idea what they are. They're just secret documents. The contents didn't matter. And the next person, if the players keep hounding after what's inside them, is free to decide what they are. Or there might be a timeout called, and everyone goes into the kitchen to refill their glasses of Coke and get more chips and whatnot. And the GMs say, well, what should those secret documents be? and they move forward. Right. So 3 different ways to handle it. Right. Obfuscate and interfere until it comes around to that original game master again, and finally the player's plans are successful. You can tell from my tone of voice, I'm sure, that is not my favorite approach. Because it denies the players the freedom to act as they will. Or open collaboration, right? You have introduced that it's secret documents. You did not introduce what they were. The next game master is totally free to introduce what they were, and you go with it, as long as it's consistent with what has already been established. And that, as I mentioned before, is what the binder's for. So third is an improvisational instant conference between the game masters about what those things should be. And maybe there's other ways to handle, but these are just ones which I've been involved with personally. So it's totally possible to have even something so difficult as secrets in a game with multiple GMs. So running a game with multiple game masters is definitely possible. When I first started playing role-playing games more than 30 years ago, this was basically our default. We didn't do it with any art or skill. We just kept switching, and the adventures, the dungeons of whatever that we were exploring, these things were finite. They had a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the next person to take on the game mastering duty didn't have to maintain any sense of continuity. It was easy, didn't require much skill. But later, as we began to have a persistent campaign world, as the events of one adventure or one exploration led into the next session, as the campaign began to take on the aspects of a story, then it became harder to just switch between game masters. There were secrets in play and whatnot, and it leads people to believe that you can't. You have to keep everything separate. Well, it's not actually true. Yes, you can keep secrets, and yes, you can have multiple game masters operating in the same game world. You can have all the players all being game masters. You can have some of the players all being game masters, but it doesn't have to be the case that one person is stuck being the game master all the time. Now, of course, there are going to be situations where you will want to have your own game. You want to be the person running that. You want to introduce the game to the group or whatever. But eventually, if that game sticks with your group and you are playing it for years and years and years, the opportunity to become a player, it'd be nice if that presented itself. I think a lot of game masters feel that way. I wish I could play this game. this is one way to do that. And while it's a little bit more effort, it's not as much effort as you think. Once again, a link to all of this information in text will be available in the description box below. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been somewhat helpful and might inspire people to give this a try.